What's going on, advocates? Welcome back to Equity with your host, Reginald A. However, we still getting new around here. Since the rebrand, I'm still old habits die hard, they say. But welcome back, man. Thank you for everybody that's like, sharing, subscribing, um, and doing all that good stuff to make these conversations continue to happen. Um, and of course, we're gonna get right into the episode because I don't want to waste anybody's listening or viewing experience. But yes, today's conversation is with a wonderful guest, which we will get to shortly. But of course, with every conversation with the guest, there were a few jewels and gems that I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper on and, you know, bring up a different conversation because, or not even a different conversation, but I didn't, sometimes these episodes go on and I don't get to, dive into everything as much in the short amount of time that I have with the individual. So, I try to do these after we go back and, listen to them and really get into them and just really figure out and provide some more information. So without further ado, let's get started. So within the conversation with today's guest, we talked about language being a behavior. And I thought it was very interesting because, of course, we know that the things we do come from, or maybe we don't know. So the things that we do come from past experiences and things you may not even realize is what's going on with inside of you. So, I wanted to go in deeper on that. And I found an article online that talked about and shout out to Karen Gross. My mom's name is Karen, so shout out to you. But and she talked about and I don't know if she identifies with she, but I'll just go under the assumption she talks about behavior is the language of trauma. And I also think behavior can be the language of good experiences as well. You do certain things because of the great experiences you have as well. So it could be of some past trauma, but it also could be like I've done these things because they feel good to me. And I can and they continue to travel with me throughout my adulthood. So Karen starts off the article saying, I've been approached by many people recently about dysregulation. Let's look up dysregulation because I want to make sure I have proper definitions for everything. So when we're reading and trying to understand, we know what it is. So what is dysregulation? Dysregulation or emotional dysregulation is an inability to control or regulate one's emotional responses, which can lead to significant mood swings, significant changes in mood, or emotional liability. It can involve many emotions, including sadness, anger, irritability, and frustration. So I think that's a good, solid definition. Okay, where you unable to regulate yourself. So, all right, without that, so our educators, our parents, our families. Let's read that over. I've been getting questions about dysregulation. Students are dysregulating. So are educators. So are parents. So are families. So are individuals in relationships. So are workers. So are travelers. So are drivers of vehicles. So are folks across the nation. And I want to hold this image up as I read this because she goes into it. So I'll read it from my phone. So I'm able to look back and forth and refer back to it because I want to be able to give you all the description while also being able to observe the description or the picture as I describe it. So give me a second as I pull that up. Um, all right, I gotta find my place. Look at the image, wherever you're viewing this at. On the left side, and if you're not viewing it and you're just listening, I'll make sure to do my best to describe it to you. Look at the image. On the left side at the bottom, as you look at the image, there is an order. Not everything is identical importantly. Things are regulated. Items are in a row. Sure, there are some differences like there are among us, but order is present. On the other side of the image, things are disordered. The squares are of different sizes and colors, and they are not aligned. The spacing of the squares is off too. The squares are then what we call what we can call dysregulated. So for those who are only listening, imagine you got a screen or a picture, and on the left side of the screen it looks like a checkerboard with like little pieces on there, like different checker pieces on there. And then on the right side you got something similar to a checkerboard, but not quite, where it's just a bunch of squares just out of order placed across the rest of the picture. So it has the like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 squares that's just all over the screen, while on the other side there's like a checkerboard board looking figure that appears to have a pattern. Ponder that idea as we consider what dysregulation looks like in individuals, what this dysregulation means and what it causes. Dysregulation occurs when a person has an outsized reaction to a current event or a trigger outside the norms within our society. Because um, I know sometimes people can say you're blowing up about something where it may cause for a blow up, but because society doesn't recognize it as a blow up, people will say it's outrageous. Um, and then are then unable to control their behavior, at least initially. Dysregulation can take many forms, including shouting, hitting, agitation, extreme anxiety, throwing things or oneself, nasty commentary involving oh, that's a word, vituperative words, and words can surely hurt. To be sure, dysregulation may look vastly different when exhibited by children, adolescents, young adults, more mature adults, or even seniors. So that's everybody. Consider the young child who has a temper tantrum. That is dysregulation. The youngster holds his or her breath until he or she turns blue is dysregulating. See, this is where we got to have cultural competency, because I don't know if a few people of color that turns blue. We may turn purple. The student who throws a chair or repeatedly pounds on a desk is dysregulating. The student who breaks a window or punches a hole in the wall is displaying dysregulation. The student or worker who disrupts a class or a work shift by throwing their body or their words around at others so that peers cannot do their prospective work is dysregulated. The adult who screams and turns red, again, cultural competency. The adult who screams or turns a different color. There we go. I'm just going to place my own in there. And spews spit is dysregulating. The adult who taps his or her car on the back of another car to show displeasure with other drivers' behavior is dysregulated. The adult who pushes in a line and tramples over others to get attention is dysregulated. The senior who hits medical caregivers or a spouse is dysregulated. The senior who barricades an exit from a location is dysregulated. These are but a few examples. So before we go into that, I'm going to stop the share because that's why I love these articles. And again, shout out to you, Karen, for putting this out here, Karen Gross, because it's a great way to like start describing some of these things that individuals are feeling and may not know. One of the first things I think of is my son, my baby son, where we're probably going to have to get him emotional support because he wilds out during transitions. We're constantly getting calls, me and his mother, we're constantly getting calls of like when it's time to when it's time to go from like, all right, it's playtime, let's do this activity, or if it's time to go from lunch to another activity, he's not having it. He wilds out those chairs, pushes people, does all these different things, and we're trying to find ways without for lack of better terms, the ways that our parents showed us. We're trying to find ways to get him the support that he's needing, because he's pre-K right now, but he's going into kindergarten, and that's a big environment and they don't allow for certain things. So we're trying to find that that really emotional support when it comes to that, because we definitely know that it is not going to be tolerated everywhere. But one of the things that I'm thinking of as I trying to find a perfect video that describes it. See, I love these articles because I never know what I'm going to be able to pull from this information. But one of the things I recently learned about was rage rooms. And for some reason it's not, and again, having these conversations around personal development, professional development, mental health, therapy, and all those different things. um I never knew about a rage room. When you are being destructive and you do certain things, people just identify that way differently, than needing a rage room where you can just blow off streams. And it wasn't until I got into the mental health field that I learned about rage rooms, which I'm going to pull up now. So that was a bit of stalling while I filled it up. But one of the things I learned about the rage rooms is that it's a fair practice in a lot of different countries, cities, all these different things, and it should be one that's brought into certain environments. I'll say that aren't fortunate enough to have to experience these things, because I think a lot of kids would benefit from it, especially in particular young males who are trying to, for lack of a better term, discover, I want to say, maybe not discover, but process. That's a better word. Process emotions and figure things out. I think that would be good for them overall if um we learn how to get those. So I'm gonna play this video off of YouTube, and shout out to the CBC News that's putting it up about rage rooms. Shout out to Shar Andrews here, based out of Philadelphia. I know she's doing great things around the rage room. She was on the podcast before, so shout out to her. But I'm gonna get right into it. Oh, sorry. But I'm gonna get right into just sharing about rage rooms, just in case if you never heard of it, and if it's not a practice that you're familiar with, you can get introduced to it. So all right, give me a second. Here we go.
One of those days? So cool. This may be the place for you. Toronto's first rage room. The idea is from Serbia.
Never seen anything like this. And in everyday life, you get stressed out. So I said, let me check it out. It seems like a cool concept. I need more stuff to snack. $3 to get 30 minutes in the rage room. And you also start off with 5 plates and the protective gear you need.
Okay. You're geared up. It's time to choose a weapon. We have a golf club, a crowbar, a baseball bat, and even a hockey stick. The old crowbar meets a ball. And that's a strike. Christine Pinkoski, now she hit a homer.
Are you less angry? Yeah, I feel like I could hit a couple more plates, but yeah, I think I definitely released some stress.
The rage room is averaging 20 bookings a week, and people are forking out extra for items on the smash menu. Most people are dropping about $50.
This is a porcelain angel. We've got a printer here. Whenever you get gnomes, they go like hotcakes.
Really?
Yeah.
That just seems wrong.
It's just so happy for no reasons. We just wanted to see it not be happy. It's
Superheroes like Iron Man pay the ultimate price.
Great. I'm actually more a fan of Captain America. I find Iron Man a bit obnoxious, so it felt really good smashing him to pieces.
Reach their own, even in the rage room. Debbie Lytle-Kwan, CBC News, Toronto.
Yes, so once I found out about the rage room and how the benefits of it and how people could, like, utilize the rage room to let out some steam, I'm like, we need to get a lot more of these rage rooms in different places, because I don't think everybody has the ability and affordability, but we need them because they're great. They are great foundational pieces, and I think a lot more people will benefit if we can get them in these environments that don't know about them. But going back, and I definitely lost I lost my what do you call that? Oh, there we go. All right. I lost my video with my stuff in it, of course. But going back to the article, when we're talking about behaviors, language, so I'm gonna pull up the picture again for those who are watching. And make sure y'all like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Um, but going back to the article, just getting to learn about language and rage and different things. So not only, let me make sure. few examples. Okay. If a person has squares, meaning behavior patterns, dysregulation moves their squares into different places in the space rather than some order, although not note again that the ordered squares are not all the same. The squares fly out and flip out. Not only can dysregulation take many forms, but the reasons for dysregulations are not uniform either. Neither are the solutions. Individuals can be dysregulated due to mental or physical illness. Consider the impact of brain injuries as one source. Individuals who lack appropriate social emotional learning can become dysregulated when they can't manage their feelings with respect to a new situation. Individuals who are traumatized can dysregulate as a symptom of trauma, rather whether that trauma is occurring now or is older but is being re-triggered by a current happening. And the triggering trauma can occur from many causes or multiple simultaneous causes, including sexual abuse, addiction, death, short or and prolonged separation from loved ones, war, violence, including domestic outbursts, lack of paternal love, care, insecurity, neglect in early childhood. And so a few examples come to mind when I read this article. For one, I shared about my son, that what he's going through currently, but I also think even in my relationship, there were things, and I know I talk many about that because that's where it been my true learning experience. They say if you can't, that's a real individual experience when you're trying to partner with someone. And I think my wife just sent me something the other day in regards to that. Let me see if I could pull it up in real time. I love these conversations. I don't know where it's going to go, and it can go anywhere. Yep, let me see. um
In any relationship in which two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary. Yeah. So it isn't about getting somebody who's just like you. In fact, your soulmate is the person that you have a lot of difficulty with. Your soulmate's the person you can't get rid of. They just keep showing up. You say this, they say that, and there they are. They're back again. And they never go away. They keep showing up in your life. And everybody has these people. These are our greatest teachers, because anybody in your life who can push a button and send you into a frenzy is the person who's your greatest teacher. You know why? Because they teach you that you haven't mastered yourself at this moment. You don't know how to choose peace. And of course, in Miracles, there's a wonderful line that says, I can choose peace rather than this. Whatever it is, I can choose peace.
So I play that because my relationship has been one of my greatest teachers, and I pull so many life lessons and experiences out of just that short, just this the short time span of being in a relationship. And bringing that up, my wife has taught me so much because we hadn't realized that we were preconditioned to certain behaviors that we didn't realize um we were preconditioned to. For example, because I didn't grow up with my father in my life or any consistent male. I don't like to discredit all the male, like my uncle, stepfathers, different people that stepped up in the absence. But a consistent male presence in my life. But my mom was the consistent presence throughout the journey from birth to even up till now. Um, One of the things in the beginning of my relationship, my wife used to say, like, yo, you're acting like a woman. And of course, us being who we are, she didn't express it in that exact manner. She actually expressed it in the way that you all are thinking. Um, and so once I began to unpack and unprocess, and I even said it to you all in the previous episode of me stepping into manhood after my birthday and stuff like that. But I realized it's because the way that I was growing up, my mother processed and gave me a lot of the ways that I handled situations. I was handling situations the way that I saw my mom handle things. And again, behavior being a language, she was the reason why I reacted or did things a certain type of way. I think similarly, going into my wife, she like, hey, this is how my mother reacted, or this is the way I was taught was okay to react. And so I think when we come in with these preconditioned, or I know when we come in these preconditioned behaviors, they act out not only in our relationships, but they act out personally. I know for me, when I used to be, and I still have it today, but when I used to be overly stressed, um over overly eat, snack, junk food, all these different things, pressure, everything that comes, just keep overly eating. And now, me knowing when I'm overly stressed, I have to find that I know to get my exercise in, because then I won't, that stress, that pent up stress goes into the gym. Or I'll regulate my time management, because I know if I don't get that rest period in, if I don't get that in, then it's going to cause some emotional damage throughout the week if I don't put that in place. And sometimes you got to save you from yourself. And so I try to position myself so that way I don't get those overly stressed opportunities. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but I think the article brings an important point when it talks about our behaviors and being preconditioned to um different things from our childhood that we may not even be recognizing. I think that's where I was going with that. So let me pull back up the picture for everyone that's watching. But in our world today, with its plethora of trauma, we would be wise to give educators, social workers, service workers, workplace leaders, and healthcare givers tools that they can try to re-regulate. Oh, that's a word. Excuse me. Try to re-regulate a dysregulated person. Sadly, we often do not teach those skills, and nor do we have the patience or time to. The world is always moving, and we are always in a state of like, all right, we got to go to the next. We don't even get the chance to process death and absentee and the things that we didn't get in our childhood. We don't even have time to process that, because um I like, the world's still going on and you get taught that. And so I know, for example, uh I think I spoke on it in the past, but I'll bring it up again. Me and my wife grew up two different ways, right? So she grew up single, only child, and she got, I don't want to say she got everything she wanted, but she didn't have to worry about fighting for resources, for lack of a better term. Me, we grew up in up to a point, and when I reached about like middle school slash high school, it was just me, my mom, and my uncle. But living together. But for a majority of my upbringing, there were different family members that may have stayed with us and within the room, or within the household. And so I was kind of used to having multiple family members in at once, and making do with my little space provided. Whereas and I'll give you an example, where my wife, she'll take over majority of the room, because she always had that when she lived by herself or when she was the only child. I am comfortable with stuffing myself in a corner, um, and being able to make do with my corner, because I had to at one point. Fighting for spaces and growing up. So I think, again, even up to adulthood, I pay bills and all that stuff, but I'm still so used to that corner, because I never had that space to like come out and explore, if that makes sense. So um I think not even realizing that, as I started to unpack, I was like, hey, you can like expand yourself. Like, I still to this day don't feel comfortable like taking over. It's like, yeah, you don't want to overbearing. It's like, bro, you're the head of the household now, or at least one of them. And so you can do what you need to do, but just growing up in that type of way, you're not comfortable with doing that, because of the upbringing that you were provided at that moment. Vice versa, my wife doesn't know how to like, I gotta slim down, because I'm not slim down my items, because I'm not living here by myself. So I think that was a great example of what this article is saying. So um it is their observation that should, let me make sure, re-trigger, no, hold on. Hold on, let me make sure I get it. Consider, all right, we got that. If person has squares, we got that. We got that. Multiple say. It is these observations that should lead us to act when confronted with a dysregulated person of any age, not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you. noting a book of the same name co-authored by Oprah. To be sure, it doesn't help to shout out what happened to you in a nasty or demeaning or frustrating tone. How we enable someone to re-regulate who is dysregulated isn't a one size fits all answer. But in our world today, with its plethora of trauma, we will be wise to give educators, social workers. I did read that. Maybe to try to re-regulate dysregulated person. Sadly, we often don't teach those skills. I remember that. Um, that said, there are others who are very capable of re-regulating troubled kids and adults, although they may not know or name the strategies they're using. Life experiences has been their guide or instinct or personal experience. For this latter group, understanding why what they are actually doing that is working is helpful too. If you can name what works, then you have a way of understanding why a given strategy is beneficial and when it is best to be deployed. And one can be prepared. More on that later. On one added note, just getting angry is not being dysregulated. Anger is an emotion that is acceptable and even good to feel if the anger can be controlled. That's why we did the rage room. For example, someone who consciously write an email that is angry to their boss or in a relationship is not dysregulating. It may be unwise or unnecessary, and there may be better modes of expression, but that is not dysregulation. This isn't about not getting angry. I think anger gets a bad rep. A lot of people villainize anger, but anger is a valid emotion. It's just the way it's expressed is the what we should consider when we're trying to deal with anger. Rather, the dysregulation we are addressing here is about expressing feelings and emotions. There we go. Or unidentified in ways that are not within the norms behavior of our society. Other cultures may be different, may have different approaches, and are disruptive and uncontrolled, and often generate both physical and psychological indica. Consider an adult who is so anxious that she/he cannot function. They cannot concentrate. They cannot work. They cannot communicate verbally or in writing. They are pacing and they are unable to identify what is troubling them. They are having a panic attack of sorts. This is this is deregulation. Dysregulation. I think that's deregulation. There may be many causes of which trauma is but one. To be clear here, anxiety per se is not bad. It is the height of the level of anxiety that can take it outside the range of what is healthy and manageable. I want to stop right there too because I'll one of the things I've learned over the years when it comes to anxiety or just, personally dealing with stress and the way you manage it. For me, I am one of them people when and I'm trying not to own it. I'm trying to learn it, trying to, get past it. But I definitely am one of them people that when I'm not in the best mood, and a lot of people know I'm upbeat, I love to have fun and move around and do different things. But when something is not, especially what I just was going through when I expressed earlier this year, when something is not going as what I planned, I shut the world down. And it's the worst feeling, though. I shut the world down. I could be doing so good, I can have everything working in my favor, but when I'm emotionally not in a great space, I'll shut the world down. I'll shut the world out. And it's always hard because you are that individual that's always checking in on people. You are the individual that um make sure you create space, but when it's time for people to create space for you, it's hard for you to do. And I think for me, that's one of the things I'm learning or trying to work on because I know that I have to be able to process these things better, but it's not always easy. As you know, we are human. We have flaws and we're all trying to work for them daily, but I'm trying my best to not shut the world down and shut the world out, but it's not an easy feat. So going back to the article, this discussion about dysregulation is in the context of trauma. This discussion about dysregulation in the context of trauma isn't about pathology or mental illness. Dysregulation is about responses that are not controllable, not understood, not manageable, and that stand in the way of an individual processing what is happening in their mind and body. And oftentimes, but not always, dysregulation is a behavior that bespeaks trauma. Re-regulation tools in the context of trauma. Remembering that there is no one size fits all solution to dysregulation, let's start with this distinction. There are differing approaches. There are differing approaches to dealing with dysregulation, where the individual dysregulating is presenting a danger to themselves or others. In these situations, we need to create safety for everyone. That may well involve removing the dysregulated individual from the group, suboptimal though that is from a trauma recovery perspective. For situations where the dysregulation is disruptive and disturbing in many senses, there are differing set of strategies. It is this latter category of dysregulated individual that we are focusing on here. To be clear, preserving safety for all has primacy primacy. So it's primary. So again, if the dysregulation presents a clear and present danger to anyone, including the person dysregulating, then takes priority. But that is not our topic here. So again, for myself, I've learned that I have a responsibility as a father, a husband, worker, and I mean I'm the person that won't show up to work. I'm the person that will neglect his responsibilities. And I've learned over the years that you can't, but again, it is what it is. I will neglect my responsibilities as a father, as a husband, all those different things. Because it's just unbearable at times. And I've learned that it's also okay to for one, okay not to be okay, but also okay to take time for yourself when you're not in your best of spirits. It's almost when it's too much time, and you have to seek support and not put yourself in those situations in the first place. Again, like I spoke on earlier, but it's not always easy to identify when it's happening. There could be a series of just like unforeseen circumstances that happen back to back to back that it just pile on you. One day you wake up in this hole of like, what the hell happened? And excuse me, you don't even know where it came from. So I want to make sure I put that out there where it's not always going to be like uh right there in your face. It's not going to always be right there in your face. It may just pop up on you and sneak up on you. So um all right, let me go back to the article. So start with prevention. All right, let me bring and it may not refer back to the picture, so maybe I can go back to the article. Because I want y'all to read and be able to see it. And again, I hope these are as interesting to you as it is to me. I try to get this information and give it out and remix it in a way that it works for everybody. But start with prevention before we turn in dealing with before we turn to dealing with a dysregulated person. I want to spend a few minutes, words or ideas on our capacity to notice that dysregulation is on the horizon. This matters because it's easier to help someone who is on the road to dysregulation rather than someone who is already totally dysregulated. Think about it this way. If we can identify the telltale symptoms of a heart attack and intervene, that is vastly better than trying to restart someone's heart after it stopped beating. Great analogy. To be sure, there may not be enough time to notice shifts or read clues and I just said that, in messages that are being demonstrated or evidenced by someone who will dysregulate. That said, it's always better to prevent dysregulation if possible. Start with this reality. Dysregulation is not as common if the adult in the room is calm and role modeling calm continuously. Dysregulation is also not as common when trust exists between the adult in the room and the student/worker patients. Dysregulation is not as common if the adult in the room knows something personal and important about those for whom he or she is caring, teaching, serving/working. Dysregulation is not as common if the adult in the room has quality communication with those whom he or she is caring, teaching, serving, and working. I don't know what the article is going to continue saying, but I can attest to this. When they're saying the adult in the room, adult can be emotional wise, like emotional maturity. And it's not to because I know I'm emotionally immature in those spaces where it's like, hey, be an adult, you got these responsibilities, step up to those responsibilities. But being an adult in the room all just means being emotionally responsible, and I think a lot of people fear being emotionally responsible. They don't acknowledge that they're being emotionally responsible. It's like people are comfortable in being emotionally immature, and their lives attached to that immaturity. I don't think a lot of people recognize that there's lives attached to that and how they're emotional. I talk often about my father and personal experiences. His emotional immaturity affected so many my siblings, my mother, so many generations that come after him and even above him because of his emotional immaturity. And so I think a lot of people have to recognize like who am I affecting with my emotional immaturity, and what can I do to help not only for myself. Like a lot of the times when I'm trying to re-regulate that, using that term, it's because I see my sons and trying to teach them and modeling behavior so that they can learn how to do the same with themselves. So just trying to learn. This article is teaching me a lot again about doing certain things that I didn't even realize that was happening. So um going back in here, say pause for a moment. That just describe action, knowledge, activities. Pause for everyone. The just describe action slash knowledge slash activities can be viewed as tools to prevent dysregulation, but and this is important, even with these tools, deregulation can and oftentimes does occur. It is no one's fault. It often occurs without warning and without explanation, at least initially. Most of the time, dysregulation is done without intent. Meltdowns are not planned for events. That's a fact. In a sense, it's similar to criminal law where intent matters before we punish. In the context of dysregulation, with rare exception, the quote unquote bad behavior is neither planned or nor intentional. Finding clues. Now, these are not the only tools that can help prevent or minimize dysregulation. Notice that the above suggestions are largely in the control of the adult in the room, quote unquote. What follows are concrete hints that the quote unquote adult in the room can look for in those whom they are educating slash serving slash working. And here's an acronym to help one remember these clues, and they are only clues. Sometimes the clues can lead down a false pathway. Sometimes they are suggestive but not definitive. Use them recognizing they are neither the be all, end all, nor a complete list of possible clues. And above all, don't blame yourself if you miss or misunderstand a clue. The acronym is SHOW, SHOW, an overview with the explanation to follow. The S is for the square sampling. The H is for the hypervigilance. The O is for ordered slash disordered. And the W is for wandering. Eyes or body parts or the whole body. And the word show has meaning too, because those who may dysregulate may show their cards, so to speak, before they dysregulate fully and completely. So let's go into the S a little bit deeper. S, square sampling refers to how the quote unquote adult in the room looks over and observes those who are there. It starts by looking in the four corners of a room and then creating a square as one looks down the back row, down the side rows, and then across the front row. One might be amazing, but what one notices if one observes with intentionality, this works in all shapes room and all seating arrangements. So let's go into because I don't really understand that, if I'm being honest. They became familiar with this approach based on a video taken out of them teaching some years ago where they were being critiqued at their own request, they might add. What they saw and would never admit is and this I had not actually seen it on tape, was that I taught primarily to the right side of the room, and within that I focused on more or less between the front and the back. I would have said I teach all corners of the room, but I wasn't doing that. The educator critiquing me said, teach or speak when given a presentation to the four corners and develop eye contact with those in the four corners and then move inward. That's a good speaking technique. I'm gonna have to use that. Square sampling refers to how the adult looks over and observes those who are there. Starts by looking in the four corners of the room and then creating a square um, as one looks down the back row, down the side rows, and then across the front row. I'm definitely going to use that when I'm speaking. Hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is not easily cultivated, and it has its downside for sure. But for those who have been traumatized, one of the after effects is hypervigilance. Now, this means that if the adult in the room, quote unquote, has had their own trauma experience that they process, it may be easier to detect dysregulation than others. Hypervigilant folks can detect early if something is off in the tone, style, atmosphere in the room. Hypervigilant folks can sense when a person is struggling. I think I'm very hypervigilant. Sometimes before the person themselves they may even realize. The hypervigilant person can look around a room and get a feeling about those in the room who are stressed, anxious, or struggling. A hypervigilant person can detect when a personal relationship is going off the proverbial rails. It is as if their own trauma has given them a telescope that allows them to recognize trauma in others. The O. The O can be best understood by returning to the image at the start of this article. All right, let me go back. Okay. Observe that someone is struggling to find them something in their in their backpack or desk or purse, or alternatively the things that are all disordered as they unpack and get ready to start their day. This might signal that what preceded entry into the school or the workplace or the medical setting was not optimal. We get anxious and flustered and stressed when things happen to us, and we carry those feelings with us into where we are going. I told you I shut the whole day down if I'm not feeling good. Um, by way of example, is a child who has witnessed a huge fight between her caregivers at breakfast and was also rushing to get to the bus. That child may enter school not ready, willing, and able to learn. They need to process and reset based on the breakfast that occurred, and the child may not realize how affected they were by what they witnessed. Infants are often aware of parental stress too, even if they lack words to express what they're hearing and seeing and sensing and smelling. An example would be a new mother struggling to nurse. The infant can sense the struggle, and that may account for the infant's crankiness and unease. Yes, it could also be a wet diaper or allergy to some formula. Um, all right. So the W. The quote unquote adult in the room can also gauge whether folks within the room folks with whom they are working with are engaging with them. Are someone's eye wandering? Are they focused on the outdoors, not what's going on in the room? Are they looking down? Are they glued to their devices? Are they fidgeting too much in their seat or having trouble getting seated? um these described wanderings may, but not always, suggest that a person has experienced something ontward and remembered something ontward recently. When we disengage or when we don't connect, that is a signal because our brains are wired for connection. When we disconnect, which is one of trauma's hallmarks, wandering is what we do. Um, these wanderings, the inability to connect with another person right then, are a message. It is not a message to leave me alone. Indeed, it is a message saying, I need you to connect with me. The problem, of course, is that on the surface, it appears that the affected person wants to be alone, but that is a facade for the reality that they feel alone and want to find an anchor, a way to connect again. And if a person stays disconnected, it's way easier to dysregulate. Bottom line, if we see one or more indications of show, we have a warning sign that a person is struggling. And before things get totally dysregulated, we can try to connect through words or eye contact or a touch on the shoulder. Sometimes if an adult in the room senses lots of children slash adults with the show symptoms, they can pause what they were doing and engage people in exercise that lowers anxiety and stress and even distract someone from where they were sitting mentally. And one other point before the rest of this article is, not seeing show is not a sign of failure. It is often hard to see, hear, experience, and also in some instances show may not even occur or may be stimulating when regulation. Let me see how much we got in this article. Oh, it's a lot more that I didn't realize before picking it. It's a great article. All right. All right. So I'm going to put the link to this article, but I did want to play a video before I get this episode started. So I left you all with show, but and introduce you to the Rage Room, but I wanted to play this video, interesting facts about human behavior, because I think it's pretty cool. Give me a second. And make sure you like, share, subscribe, and let me know how you felt about this article. Hold on, they trying to give me a Steph Curry commercial. All right. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, review on Apple, review on Spotify, all the good stuff. All right. Let me play this video. Let me know your thoughts.
Interesting psychological facts about human behavior. Have you ever wondered why we think, feel, and behave in the ways that we do? It's a source of fascination for many. After all, the way our minds function has a lot to do with how we do things and how we are. Human behavior, brain function, and mental processes have been studied extensively. And while there are still a lot of unanswered questions, and there is a long way to go, by learning about the fundamentals of behavior and the human mind, we're able to gain a better understanding of ourselves and others. In this video, we have gathered some truly interesting facts about the psychology of human behavior that will help better understand why we think, feel, and behave in certain ways. Let's jump right in. Number 1, things that happen to us in early adulthood stay with us long term. Have you ever noticed how often older people talk about their early 20s? Or have you ever wondered why so many people love coming of age stories? Well, this phenomenon is referred to as the reminiscence bump. You see, we have a preference for recalling experiences from adolescence and early adulthood, primarily due to the emotional intensity of this period, because of the number of choices and changes that occur during that time. Graduation, marriage, the birth of a child, these are all new experiences, making them much more memorable. Research also suggests that memories are easily accessible from the reminiscence bump because they are linked to self-identity and significantly contribute to an individual's attitudes, beliefs, and life goals. Number 2, thinking about your problems from a third-person perspective allows you to find effective solutions. Would you say you think about other people's problems more clearly and sensibly than your own? According to research,
Hold on, we have a commercial in the building. Well, I love that, a reminiscent bump. I mean, again, I tell you, I get excited about certain things that I don't be knowing that people are excited about, but it definitely gets me up and going and wanting to, share with everybody. So I just thought I'd start bringing things to the podcast as they are very interesting to me. All right, we may experience another commercial, but let's go.
answer for most people is yes, and this is known as the Solomon's paradox. People, regardless of age, are more likely to think more rationally while contemplating someone else's difficulties than when addressing their own problems. That said, a self-distancing strategy can eliminate this bias. So, the next time you're faced with a personal dilemma, practice your reasoning skills by taking a step back and considering your situation from an outsider's perspective. Number 3, those most incompetent are the least aware of their own incompetence. You've probably witnessed this happen, maybe around the dinner table, during a holiday family gathering. During the meal, an extended family member begins talking about something, claiming to be right, and everyone else is foolish, ignorant, or just plain wrong. This person's lack of knowledge is obvious to everyone in the room, yet they continue to ramble on, blissfully unaware of their own ignorance. This is called the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias in which people think they are smarter and more capable than they actually are. Their poor self-awareness and low cognitive ability leads them to overestimate their actual capabilities. Number 4, Hostile people tend to own more aggressive dogs. Research shows that anger, aggression, and hostility are more common in the personality of owners of stereotypically violent breeds. Could it be possible that people choose dogs that are an extension of themselves? We typically select friends and partners with similar interests and tendencies. So why not pets? Perhaps, but other factors may also influence people's aggression and their choice of violent breeds. For instance, those who are socially isolated, have fewer visitors, or live in high crime neighborhoods are more likely to be under chronic stress, possibly making them more aggressive, and thus, they would be more inclined to pick a guard dog, such as a Rottweiler or Pit Bull. Number 5, daydreamers are more creative. Do you tend to get in trouble for daydreaming in class or during a meeting at work? Mind wandering is often viewed as a negative trait, but it's not necessarily the case. In fact, daydreaming may indicate intelligence and creativity. According to research, high measured intelligence and creativity go hand in hand with high levels of mind wandering. What's more, frequent daydreamers not only tend to score higher on IQ tests, but their brains also appear to be more efficient. Yes, some people have more efficient brains than others, which translates into an increased capacity to think. And as a result, their brains may wander when performing easy tasks. They can zone in and out of discussions or tasks when appropriate, then seamlessly tune back in without losing crucial details or steps. Number 6, rejection literally hurts you. Have you ever felt like you got punched in the stomach after being rejected by someone? Why is that? Well, apparently, that's how our minds are wired to respond. Turns out, the same parts of our brains get activated when we experience rejection as when we experience physical pain. That's why even small rejections hurt more than they should, as they elicit literal, though emotional, pain.
When I voiced
Hold on, we got commercials, man. I'm learning so much. Just from these little one, because I definitely wanted a more aggressive dog. So that showed me where I'm an extension at. But I definitely did want a more of aggressive dog. Now I feel like I want to get a much more like lighter dog now. Just because I don't want it to speak a certain way, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll get 2 dogs. All right, I turned it down.
You might think that people would make the same decisions no matter what language they were using, or that the difficulty of using foreign language would make decisions less systematic. However, the opposite is true. Using a foreign language is shown to reduce decision-making biases. When speaking a foreign language, we need to suppress our native language. And in order to think rationally, we have to suppress our innate intuitions. Brain imaging studies show the same parts of the brain are involved in both foreign language use and rational thought. And when foreign language speakers activate their brain's inhibition center, their intuitions and emotions are also inhibited. As a result, individuals make more rational decisions when speaking a foreign language. Number 8, we blame a person's behavior on their personality, unless it's us. Have you ever been infuriated by someone cutting you off while driving, only to do the same thing to someone else a few minutes later? And while the person who cut you off enraged you, and your reaction was along the lines of, what a jerk, or this guy is an asshole, you're likely to have justified your behavior to yourself, since you were in a hurry and you only did it once. Unfortunately, we tend to believe that others do bad things because they are bad people. This is known as the fundamental attribution error, the propensity to explain a person's behavior by referring to their character rather than any situational context. Number 9, we believe that other people are more susceptible to persuasion than we are. We seem to be more aware of how advertising affects other people than we are of how it affects us, and this is referred to as the third person effect. People can see how an advertisement or a persuasive message affects their peers, but not how it affects them. Further, they are more inclined to deny its influence. And it's even worse when it's an ad for something they have little interest in. You may not realize it, but the mass media messages you are subjected to regularly subconsciously affect your mood, desires, and even attitude. Number 10, dopamine makes you addicted to seeking information. Have you ever found yourself scrolling through your social media feed for hours on end?
Yeah.
It all comes down to the dopamine-seeking reward loop.
You don't know what's gonna come
Dopamine
next.
is known as the pleasure chemical because it causes you to seek enjoyment in pleasurable activities, such as eating, sex, drugs, and so on. But dopamine also makes you become curious and seek information. So as you're scrolling through your feed, your dopamine loop is activated, making you want to keep scrolling for more information. The troubling part is that you will never be quite satisfied with the amount of information available. You'll probably keep scrolling until something interrupts you. Number 11, regularly helping others can help you live longer. Volunteering your time, money, or energy to assist others is beneficial to the world and yourself. Giving back to the community has been shown to boost happiness, health, and sense of well-being. Regularly volunteering can help manage stress and ward off sickness, while also increasing your sense of fulfillment in life. This might be due to the fact that volunteering reduces loneliness and improves their social lives. Moreover, psychologists have found that those who volunteer frequently tend to live longer than those who don't participate in such activities. Now, even though these facts are fascinating and reveal a lot about human nature, keep in mind that most of them were discovered after conducting research with small groups of people. Nevertheless, they do provide a fantastic way to raise questions and begin thinking into the mysterious world of psychological research. If you enjoyed this video,
Shout out to Brainy Dose for this amazing, amazing compiling of some interesting psychological facts about human behavior. I'm into it, man. I'm into it. It teaches me some things. I hope you all were able to gain some things as well. Again, make sure you like, share, subscribe. We're about to get into a very good episode with this upcoming guest, and I appreciate you all for continuing to support. I'm still trying to think of a way to like close these things out, but again, enjoy the episode. I'll talk to you soon. Joined today with me is a special guest. I must put a disclaimer, I am a little under the weather, but we're not going to cheat y'all out of an episode today. I'm going to turn it on for you all and then go to sleep afterwards. I don't introduce anybody, my brother. I want you to get all your credentials out there, get all of the reasons why people should be listening to you out there, and then we're going to get into the conversation, let the people know who you are.
All righty. I am Dre Charley. Some call me Affecting Change Charlie. What it is I believe in everything I do, I should affect change, have an impact. So I'm out of the Metro Detroit area and I'm here for this interview.
Yes. So, well, I guess I never got to ask you this question, but this why I don't have any questions. Where did the affecting change? Of course, we know what it means, but like, what does it mean to you? Where did it come from for you on your end?
All right, cool, very good. So I actually started out I'm a clinical therapist, so I started out with motivate, and mentor. And I call it 3M Consulting Services. Well, 3M is trademarked. So I got the nice letter in the mail. Hey, cease and desist. Yes, sir. We would take care of that. And I had been debating between affecting change and 3M because they both speak, and that's like a mantra of mine to individuals, motivate them, and mentorship has been in my blood. So what it is I had a policy class in undergraduate, and the book was Affecting Change, where social workers would intervene on the political arena and affect change. So I figured that was one of the things that I really loved about the title, because I wanted to impact change wherever or anybody I touch, any situation. I want them to be different and better because I was there.
No, I like that a lot. Why did you choose this vehicle to affect change? Because you could have chose anything in the world. What made you go this route?
Yeah, very interesting story with that, because I went to undergraduate as a music education major.
Oh, what? See,
and, yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I wanted to teach because that's what impacted me. I was able to connect the dots when I was in high school and maybe even middle school. Music helped me. Music actually saved my life because it wasn't an easy childhood. So I found peace and tranquility and balance when I would be in music, playing my trumpet. Started off in fifth grade with violin and moved over to trumpet in sixth grade. And I figured, well, because my music teacher ended up being my mentor and the way he helped me, I can help other people. So I just continued to work through that process in my mind and said, well, I love music. I love my trumpet. That's what I'll do. I didn't really know anything else I could do. I thought business and those different things, but I didn't really know. So I declared music education as my major and went in. It was a challenge because oral training, you got to be able to hear music history. Those two are challenges for me. I could get the theory and understand the music and all of that, but that even is a challenge as you increase in music. But I was up for the challenge, man. But man, this ear trying to hear certain things, I kept getting D's in oral training, and I was just like, it's got to be a better way than this. And I'm not happy now because I'm getting D's and my grade point is dropping. So I adjusted my thoughts and thought, what else can I do and still have an impact? Didn't know. So I said, all right, I'll want to work with youth. I'll go and be a juvenile probation officer because I did a little research, juvenile probation. And I talked to the criminal justice department and they was vibing with me. He was like, it kind of sounds like you're in between, you're searching and seeking. I think with everything you're saying that you may want to have a conversation with the social work department as well. Shot me down to social work, sat down, and Nancy Udoff said, I think it would align with what you want, but I'm not, just going to say that because I'm biased, but take the intro course and let's go from there. And I took the intro to social work and loved it. Had no idea what it was.
That's sort of on the similar path that I'm on now with like they was talking about. I always had a infatuation for entrepreneurship and business. But again, mixing that with like the mental health component, like that's been in my family for generations. And so when I went to school, I thought I was coming to be a therapist. I don't know if I'm still going to go that route, but as I started to understand majors, they were telling me that there was a major called Health Services Administration. And that's basically like you run the people with that bachelor's, they get to run organizations, health organizations. And I'm like, I never even thought about that as a viable option. I still get to do my mental health component, but I also get to mix in the business entrepreneurship side of it. So it's funny how life works in that way. Um, I wanted to rewind a little, well, two things actually, because you spoke on having a rough childhood, but I don't want to leave the music component part too, because you said you had to listen for certain things, and that was one of the problems, but you still wind up becoming a listener as a therapist, right? So
Right.
talk
Right.
about that, like how what was the difference in the training, or did you had to shift something within you so that way you'll be able to, listen in a different way now that it was
Yeah.
struggling with as a music person.
Yeah. So listening as a music with oral training, it's kind of like you have to separate out the layers of music, tones, your notes, instruments, voices, and it was a bit much. Now, what I do know now, which we can probably talk about later, I may have been able to do that. I did not know I actually had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So all the noise became too much and it was too stimulating. So I wasn't able to do all of that. However, in therapy, even when there's noise, when this person is speaking, even if it's a group, it's easier to separate out because you can kind of, ask someone to wait and pause, wait till someone else gets done, hear their thought, and you can actually listen to an individual's statements and I can dissect from there in a therapeutic setting. But you don't get a chance to do that in listening to a band or orchestra play or a choir sing and they're all singing until the director or whoever is recording separates them out for me. And then I can hear my part individually and sing the notes. But altogether, it's a challenge.
My wife just got done taking a music course because she's in school as well, and she was like, I can't distinctly sing, like how you said, it's the layers, like it's like the hardest
Man,
thing in the world. I don't even know what she got in that grade, and I want to ask her now because she said it was the hardest thing. I don't hear none, I hear trumpets, or like, but it's so many different layers on top of
oh,
that.
yeah. Take me back to a trauma episode. This is traumatic because I'm like, how can I be a music teacher and I can't hear? But honestly, until I was sitting here right now, I didn't make the connection that if I was medicated back then,
Mm.
probably would have been able to have more success.
Well, I'm actually you tied two of the questions that I want to ask together. Like, do you feel that now looking back on it, on your younger self, that the ADHD played a part into that, the trouble growing up, or was it separate issues in its entirety?
Yeah, it was separate issues in its entirety, but it also is closely connected because you're really impulsive with ADHD and hyper with ADHD. So it could have led to bad decision making,
Mm,
which can create the ability to have some traumatic episodes or experiences because you didn't make the right decision when given a choice. You
mm.
know, so that was one part. But then the what was the second part of your question?
Just growing up with the ADHD,
Right,
in general, like how that affected you, and then like even I wanted this other part of the question was just like the troubled childhood and
right.
how it shaped your experiences growing up.
Yeah, because having the ADHD not diagnosed caused troubles academically, not being able to comprehend and read to understand was a challenge. I was able to read with no problem, but remembering what I read, making context clues, pulling out the understanding, comprehension, those were issues. Story problems, anything that was more than one or two steps, I'm lost in the middle and have to start over. Didn't know anything about breaking things down and chunking information and taking breaks in order to regroup. So it was just sit down and do your homework.
Mm,
You know, if I asked my brother, who was almost like I thought maybe like a genius, because he had the smarts and the quick processing like my mom. And so I had to work harder at mine and it came easier to him. I would go, hey, how do you pronounce this word? When even when I couldn't pronounce a word or spell a word. And that's what it was. Hey, how do you spell the word? I remember that. And he said, look it up. And I'm like, well, I can't look up the word because I can't spell it. And that was just my
mm.
brother. He's quick wit. He was able to look up the word. In fact, my fifth grade teacher is the same one he had. And to this day, and she's 80, she said, your brother in my whole career was the only one that looked up a word in the dictionary faster than me. And she told me this 5 years ago.
Wow.
He just had it, but I had to work harder. So it was a lot of challenges on my end because of the comprehension. I wasn't a behavior problem because I was pretty quiet and then, you know, kind of insecure and all of that thing, all of that too. My mom died when I was 6, so that also played into some trauma and the major part of trauma actually. And then because I watched her deteriorate from about 4 years old, she had leukemia and she died when I was 6. But we had a strong connection. And I was with her like every step of the way, aside from the time she was in the hospital, even through the night and stuff.
Can you, however comfortable you feel talking about that, because I think about children, and I think you probably better equipped to answer this, but we always say, and I say we, because I'm a parent, we always say how like you ain't stressing about nothing, you ain't going through nothing, or whatever the case may be, because you're comparing what they have to worry about to what you have to worry about,
Mhm.
not realizing that it's the same comparison within the age brackets that you're in. And
Mhm.
so you face an adult size issue or an adult size trauma at that age, and then like you said, being undiagnosed and all of that. I always worry about the kids that are in communities and environments that have to deal with so many traumatic events back to back to back all around, but they're not getting the diagnosis, they're not getting the supports, they're not getting that. Talk about just how did you I don't want to say manage through that, but just like, what advice would you even give to a child that's going through that, or because they can't change their circumstances of what they're
Yeah.
in, but they still need to cope or at least get through so that way they can get to teenage and adulthood.
Yeah. So I think I'll address the one side of it first, the adults recognizing because the comment was made. You ain't going through nothing. You ain't old enough to stress out about nothing. And the important thing is understanding as adults, kids do stress out. When kids act out, they are acting out. Behavior is language, behavior is words. We have to actually understand that they're not doing some things just because they want to. They're not in control. Locus of control is off for various reasons. One could be traumatic experiences that they have experienced, and also it could be for any other medical reason like ADHD, but they feel everything in the house, the tension in the parents, the voices that they hear, the elevated tones, they hear, they feel when you speak to them in a certain way or speak to somebody else in a certain way. They take cover, they on whole thing, trauma responses, fight, flight, flee, fawn, all those things is kicking in for them too. Uh-oh, daddy is home. Let's see, how is he today? Or mama going off today. Let me see what I need to do to take cover. Let me try not to upset them any more than they are. They walked in and they didn't speak, or they walked in and threw their keys down. I know when they throw their keys down, they had a rough day. Let me be mute all evening. So they feel all of those things, and that creates stressors, and they start to act out, and they may be withdrawn and then don't develop the language in order to cope, socialize, or anything like that because they learned best to just be quiet. If I'm in the background, I'm safe. If I say something, then I'll be heard and seen, and then I could get a consequence. So that's on the adult side, and for kids, it's really difficult because depending on the age, you won't really know what to do, but just try to have fun with whatever it is, music, sports, art, dance, fine arts, all those things are really important for kids because they tend to kind of give them a safe place to be. So whether it's dance, martial arts, all of those things are very good for young people to be involved in because what's not stressful for one, even if it's a sibling group or Sibship, one kid may be dealing with something extremely difficult that another kid can't even remember or speak on because it didn't mean much to them. Then another kid for the same thing cannot speak on something because it's so traumatic for them that they can't talk. You got one kid acting out, one kid withdrawing, and one kid like, what's wrong with them? you know so
You just taught me so much in that whole paragraph. So for one, I think the title of this podcast is going to be "Behavior is Language." I think that's going to be the title. I have to say it out loud because when editing, they'll know that this is the title. And then the second part is you said something. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. Sibship, is that like the
yeah,
sibling relationship? Like
yeah,
talk
that's
about
like it's just they're the sibling group. Yeah.
Wow, that see again, just learned something new today. And then even in that space, going back to when you was talking about your brother and just like how y'all related to like learning and developing like knowledge. Um, I think about me and my stepbrother growing up, and even one of my closest best friends, and he used to always get in trouble, or they used to get in trouble, and parents thinking whoopings is the answer, and I was coherent enough to know where to find the answers, like you said, right? And being able to find the answer, whereas he may have struggled, and I used to just sneak him the answer so he can not get in trouble. You know what I mean? And the same thing with my best friend. I was helping him graduate from high school, um, by helping him with his homework. And I always felt like the adults, maybe life circumstances or whatever, they just never took the time out to figure out how they learned or like what what underlying issues was preventing them from grasping the concept. It was more so is, and I used to hate when they used to compare them to me, like, well, he got it and
Right.
he learned it, so it ain't that hard, like, and you like almost trying to beat them into knowledge. So
Right.
just I guess just in general, just talking about that, like the Sibship, which you just taught me, and how certain parents or guardians can be like, detrimental and cause trauma because of the comparison in between the relationship and not actually giving them the opportunity to grow.
Yeah, that comparison can be really detrimental because you can have two kids that are equally as bright, but they demonstrate it differently. So you may have a kid that is, well, first of all, comparing is just not good in general. Everybody's their individual, and you want to speak to your kid's strengths. You want to work with them in their area of strength because you have different ways of learning styles. A master teacher is going to teach all of the learning styles at one time while they're giving those examples. They're going to be giving maybe a hands-on. They're going to be repeating the directions. They're going to be stating the answer. They're going to break down how you got the answer. They're going to state clearly what is something that the whole class should get, because you have right brain and left brain learners, and those individuals on the right brain side are really hands-on. That's your more creative, your more music kids, arts kids. Those types of kids learn a lot of things by hands-on demonstration, seeing it visually. It may have to break it down in segments and then move forward. Where you have your left brain, they're pretty analytical. Those would be like your finance people, your accountants, those people, those individuals that you just tell me what it is, I do it. You give me all the steps. I don't care if it's 8 sentences in that paragraph. I got it. Let's get it. And they may become even more of a disruptive student because they may finish their work faster and then may be messing with another kid because why are you still working? And that could be the same thing in that sibling group at the house. And so parents like, what's taking you so long? What are you doing? And that can create sibling rivalry that can cause people, other kids, not to like their sibling because of that, or you're the favorite. And it
The
was
golden child.
yeah. And even I was talking to a guy that was about 64, and he made a statement, and I wanted to dig into it, but I didn't go there in that moment because he wasn't ready to talk about that. But he has said something like, well, my mom, she tells me she loves me, and she misses me. And he made a statement, and it was all in his spirit, where he was just like, but I'm not her favorite. And it was like something pierced him because he went back to childhood in that moment at 64 years old and realized that he still is dealing with that sibling rivalry, or that need for his mom's maybe approval or her love. And I'm like, well, nobody is, the child's their parent's favorite, really. It's whatever that child needs a good parent is trying to provide or whatever. And he's like, no, you know. And it got into a whole other thing because they shipped him off to be with the grandparents when he was young because he was the problem kid. But he was the one that needed more.
Yeah, and more attention doesn't necessarily mean like for example, I know with my children, I connect with my oldest son because we share like I want to say genetic chemistry
Mm-hmm.
together. Like we connect a little bit more. And for my youngest son, I have to find that balance with him. Like he
Right,
requires a little bit more time and effort because we just
right.
don't genetically bond, whereas his mother connects with him more instantly because she just understand what he go through. And then with my oldest son, she doesn't connect as, so that's why both parents are important. And then the
It
other thing
is.
is she's like working and struggling to make sure she get her relationship with him, so it may look like she's giving him more time because she's trying to find it. And then but she easily could connect with the baby son by just accident because they genetically just can't. Whereas me and my oldest, we get together sometimes and we just chop it up, whereas the youngest, it'd be like, all right, I gotta muster up the energy to like figure out how to like relate to you. So I understand exactly what you mean.
That's good work though that you guys are doing because you're putting in the work, because a lot of parents feel like I didn't do it for this one, so I'm not gonna do it for that one. And it's like, especially old school, it's like this, and this is what we do, this is what you get, everybody get the same. My favorite is whoever's in front of me. And it's like, no, actually, but this kid, needs something different than that kid. And it doesn't mean that is right, because you could be giving me more time, and it may not be time that I need. I may just need more compliments, or I may need more positive reinforcement. I may feel like I want to do more activities with you, but you giving me more time as we sit in front of the TV, and you may feel like since they went off to go basketball or go to band or whatever, and I'm not involved in those, and that you're going to use that time for us to sit and watch TV, when really I wanted to kind of like go get an ice cream with you. I wanted to spend some time with you in that area, just be out the house with you. It made me feel like, whole, and I'm feeling like there's a void and you're missing it. So more, and like studying more sometimes doesn't work even for students. It has to be a different strategy. So it's about that what you put in, the quantity is a little, variable, but the quality of what it is what matters. What that individual needs makes all the difference. That's why, yeah.
And it's tough as a parent too, because I think about my mom and me and my sister, like you said, creating that sibling rivalry where at one point me and my sister was going back and forth, and because she felt like my mom spent more time with me, and then I felt like she spent more time with her, and she always felt like, all right, I was the golden child because I went to school and I had the family and I did certain things, and I was like, well, I felt like because you had some other issues on your end, that mom spent more time over there with you because she had to, attend to whatever you didn't have. And she was like, well, she felt like she was over here with you because you got the golden child life. And at one point we just sat down and talked and was like, yo, we're not against each other at this point. Like I just got off the phone with her, if I'm being honest. And we had to build our connection outside of our mother instead of through her. And I think once we figured out that, we were able to know that we weren't against each other. And I think that took like adulthood to get to that point recently within the last 5 years, as opposed to growing up. It was just like bumping heads the whole time. And I think that's why when you said Sibship, I'm like, oh, I learned that. We're going to dive deeper on that. You done gave me a therapeutic term that I'm about to like pick all the therapist brains about.
Because that those siblings, it can be a lot. It can be so many things. Me and my brother didn't really communicate. I felt like he chose everybody but me growing up. And I would tell him, you let such and such go. They only a year older than me, and you said I couldn't go because I was too young. But you're 4 years older than me, and you would choose them. And so we had all of this tension growing up. And what was the tension? He just would just ignore me. Well, it shifted as we got older, like, super close. And, he's even letting me know we need to spend more time together, we need to hang out more, come around. We stay, interesting enough, the houses that we stayed at have been around the corner from each other, the last couple of places we lived at.
Wow.
And so it worked out coincidentally that I moved around the corner from him about 2016. And we're both homebodies, so it's kind of like a little hard, but he's reaching out like, hey, come around the corner. Ew. And I'm like, hey, man, sometimes this just talk this year. You're gonna have to come around the corner sometime too. Me and my sister-in-law, we all can sit down and watch movies over at my house or watch TVs. Well, we like the same shows. And he was like, yeah, we can do that. Where years ago he would have been like, nah, man, just come over here. But I was like, wow, that means he really wants to. It's not that we're distant or anything like that. We're very close, but he wants to keep that going. And I'm seeing that as he gets older, he needs to feel my presence, I guess. Yeah.
No, thanks. I'm told you I'm running with that sip shit. You taught me something. We going back to the ADHD and the ADD conversation we were having earlier. I'm always concerned with those diagnoses because, and the question I'll ask it up front is underdiagnosis versus overdiagnosis. Because I think you get one side of the coin where people saying like these kids need to be medicated. These kids are going through this, especially in the inner city and in the urban environments and Black community. They'll say these things, and then it'd be like, all right, well, I don't want to get my baby drugged up. Like y'all just want to put him on medicine, or you just trying to collect the check, or et cetera, et cetera. So talk about underdiagnosis versus overdiagnosis and how our relationship within certain communities is with it.
Yeah, so a lot, first of all, in our community, we don't really trust the system. We don't trust doctors, all the way back to the Tuskegee experiment and before, probably, we just are not trusting because of even slavery. So it's not something that, if you hear, especially from somebody in mainstream society, someone that other persuasion that's trying to convince you, sometimes it's something that you'll ignore. You just don't understand my kid. You just don't know how to work with my kid. I'm gonna go ahead and try to see if I can get him in this black school, this African center school, this art school, or something to those, to that nature. So what happens is there's a lot of individuals that are not diagnosed that could be diagnosed, but we don't necessarily take our kids to the doctors the way we should. And then we just think we can discipline and they'll just act right. When really that chemical imbalance is causing them to do whatever it is they're doing. Like, for instance, I have been diagnosed with ADHD. I probably could have got diagnosed when we were kids, but we didn't even know what that was really. We didn't know in the 80s that that was something. And my brother, I believe, because it's pretty genetic, he probably has ADHD, as my nephew had ADHD, but my brother had all A's. My brother was a fifth grade valedictorian. Even the year that our mom died, he still got all A's and the A minus. And my mom died in February of that year that he was in the fifth grade, and he was still able to pull it off because he was just what they call back in that day. He was bright.
Mm.
Smart as a whip. So I remember all of that. And then there was me. So so he had A's, and in that citizenship, one was excellent, two is average, and three was, your behavior is just unacceptable. And my brother literally had all A3s because he would finish his work before everybody else and mess with everybody because he was so distracted. I finished what I need to do, but I need to mess with people around me. I can't sit still. So because he had A's, it was ignored. Then you have the individuals that just get in trouble and trouble and trouble. They don't have good grades. And then those are the targets, but they just become behavior problems. They only look at them and discipline them and suspend them and send them home or make them work in the corner. And that's not something that's addressed because their behavior, and we punish behavior instead of teach. We teach math, we teach reading, we teach how to write, but when it comes down to behavior, we discipline.
Mm.
When really we're supposed to teach the appropriate way to act and the way we handle situations, which is why social emotional learning is important, how to handle stressors and navigate through your young adult life and your early elementary life, because those skills cross over all the way into adulthood when we implement them early. So those individuals that get diagnosed sometimes are kids that may have experienced trauma and it wasn't necessarily ADHD and they're just acting out. They could be depressed and they're acting out and they get diagnosed as ADHD and is misdiagnosed. And then you have those people that end up being overdiagnosed with ADHD because they was actually got the wrong diagnosis to begin with. And then you have individuals that didn't get diagnosed at all and they should have been diagnosed. So there's some parents that believe because you get the ADHD diagnosis, there's something wrong. Well, it just kind of guides you. It helps you understand what that kid may need: structure, guidance, positive reinforcement, different ways to do their homework, different places, not necessarily be punitive when they do things because you're very impulsive with ADHD. You're a risk taker because you got to get, that adrenaline, the dopamine, all that. You got to get your fix. You don't know why, but it's because it's not firing correctly already. So that's what the medication kind of helps do. And when you have all of those things going on, all you looked at is a behavior problem, and then you don't get the diagnosis. Whereas if you get the diagnosis, then your parents can kind of go, oh yeah, well, he just needs a break. Okay, give him 5 minutes and he'll go back. He needs to regroup, get some of his energy out, go back, sit down, and he'll do some more work. Or put him to the corner, let him work over there, put a timer on. So when after he works for 30 minutes, he can go and do some other things, because then you can become hyper focused or totally inattentive. So it's a lot of different things depending on what that kid's ADHD looks like. He's just a kid with ADHD instead of the ADHD kid. So it's kid first, diagnosis second. So then you can still feel like you're a person when you have, some type of diagnosis, or even in school, like a certification. So that's the difference between a school, like an IEP or something. It's a certification that you have, and then you have a medical diagnosis that the school may certify you in a certain place to help fit the supports that schools can offer. And then you have kids that don't need anything. You have ADHD, you get strategies. They may be on medication, they may not, because just because you're diagnosed with having ADHD doesn't mean medication. Those are two separate things. You can determine whether that student or that kid or your child needs medication as a personal preference for your family. But there are natural ways to address some things. There are things you can put in place in the structure of their day that will help as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean medication.
That actually goes in, again, learned a lot, but that goes into the question I was going to ask you, because you gave me another title for the podcast, but I'm hoping to just be a section because you said it, but I want to reiterate it. Disciplining a diagnosis, or disciplining instead of diagnosing, and I think that's very instrumental in like certain communities when you don't understand what's going on. So I want to just put that out there if you had more you wanted to add to it, but also now if I do get a diagnosis, that automatically may mean in some people's eyes that I need to get medicated for that diagnosis. But my question was, with the last thing you just end with, was, are there healthier not, I don't even want to say healthier, because healthy is different from anyone. Are there natural elements that people can implement to deal with certain diagnoses when it comes to ADHD, and something like, I can't go get, you got to get a referral, you got to get all these different things to get medicine. Like, I already know the process, I've been medicated before. But what can I do right now? I got my tea. Do I drink my tea? Like, what can I do if I need something now?
Yeah, it definitely helps. Depends on what it is, because you have inattention, and then you have hyperactivity, and then you have the combined type if you have both. And sometimes, depending on what it is, caffeine can help level you out, but then it also can amp another person up. So it depends on what their particular makeup is like. So because you have stimulants, and some stimulants will help. For me, I would need a stimulant. So that will help. And then I can drink a little caffeine and probably be cool, even on medication, but I can't do too much. But sometimes it kind of helps get me right where I need to be focused and make sure that I get everything done. Well, most things done on my to-do list. My to-do list is super long, so I rarely get everything done. So, but if I'm all over the place without being medicated, I am all over the place. I've started 17 projects and nothing got completed. Maybe one or two because the deadline was there. So I kind of work when there's deadlines, because now that's my hard stop. I can't miss this deadline. And that's how it was with school and papers. I can't miss the deadline. Give me the deadline and I have to do it. And that's something that a lot of people can work with, but it also puts you at the last minute of doing some things. We can know we got to do some stuff for weeks, but if that hard deadline is there, then I'm going to work. I'm going to start 2-3 days ahead of time and stay up to as late as I can. But I'm not a person that will pull an all-nighter. I'd rather get up early. Even when I was in college, I would get up 5 in the morning, but found out 4 was too early. 6 is perfect, and start a paper. But if it's 8 o'clock, I can't. I got to kind of pull back about 5 o'clock, because I got to be able to jump in the shower and get out the door. And so those different strategies, though, that would work for some people would be a workplace. for a kid, a workplace, even adults, a specific workplace for you to work where there's the least amount of distractions.
Mm.
Some parents allow music, and that could be a distraction. Some parents don't allow music because that could be a distraction. Some kids actually work better with music, which was interesting.
I
When
never understood that in college when people did
yeah, I
that.
can't understand it either because I'm not gonna understand nothing I'm reading. So you can forget it, man. So unless it's something by rote and I don't have to think, I can't. And then the music can't be too high or too low because it's gonna irritate me. So that whole sensory thing is a whole nother area. But you have places that should be well lit, least amount of traffic. Study is the focus, and structure, guidance, reinforcement. This happens at scheduled at this time, and this time. What made me perform better in high school, even though I wasn't medicated, is another part of my life is my father died when I was 15, unexpected as well. So I moved in with my aunt and uncle, and it was expectations. You got up at this time, breakfast will be here. We leave for school at this time. You come home from school. If you don't have band practice, you start studying. You study and you get your work done until dinner. Eat dinner, unwind, relax, do whatever you want to do. And by 10 o'clock, it's bedtime. It was a routine. It's something I'd never had before. And because I was in elementary school, staying up to 11, 12 o'clock at night. So in high school, going to bed at 10, I'm like, who are these foreign people? You know, but it worked. I had a 3.7, my first car market when moving in with them, where I had like a 0.7 in high school when I went, when I was, at home with dad. Because my dad, as long as the school didn't call, I was cool. If the school called him, you were going to pay.
Mm.
No school could call, no parents in the neighborhood could say anything that you did. He did not play disrespect, behavior, issues, and school. Outside of that, I can and do what he say. If I said do the dishes and I got home and them dishes, and he got home and them dishes weren't done, let's just say 2 in the morning, one time I got woke up and it wasn't nothing nice because you ever have a dry mouth and have to try to scream because you
get caught up in there. It's just
man, my vocal cords all clashed together dry. I was like, okay, I won't do that again. I got it. He said do the dishes. And I knew before I went to sleep that I needed to do the dishes. I was tired. I said, but I'll just get up in the morning before school and do them.
He
He
wasn't
like,
having it.
man, he must have went in the kitchen and couldn't get something, whatever. I paid for it.
Mm.
I had that problem again.
He didn't either.
He didn't either, right? He was a man of not, he was a man of not many words, but when he said what he said,
meant what he meant.
that could be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was about to close out, but you mentioned it, and again, I'm always thinking about who's listening to this and giving people hope and healing and things of that nature. So, talk about growing up without like your parents, like in a certain capacity. For one, you lost your mom at a younger age when you was in that adolescence down there, and then you lost your dad in the teenage years. Like growing up with that, like when and you almost feel like homeless, and even if you got somewhere to sleep and lay your head and food and like you said a routine, you almost feel homeless because you look at that love that someone else has from their mother and father and kind of see that missing in you. So I'm thinking about the person that's listening and they hear you and they see a successful person coming into their own right and doing their thing.
Man,
Growing up in that space, like talk about that.
man, we probably have to do a whole nother show on that, man. So I get it. It depends on how your life starts, which what makes a difference too. Because if you never had that, you'll feel a void, but you don't know really what it is. But I had mom and dad married in a house, and mom started getting sick or weak, and it was a problem with Well, she didn't come. She was here before, but now she's not. She would get up in the morning. She would make my bacon and egg sandwiches. She didn't drive, but I would watch her leave. I would get up every morning with my mom to go to work at like 5 years old and watch her walk off into the dark until I couldn't see her anymore because she was catching the public transportation to work downtown. And then I would go to sleep until it was time to go to school. And my dad would pick me up from school. It was half days then. And sometimes I'll go to the babysitters and sometimes I'll hang with him. Well, the highlight was, hey, we're going to go see your mom for lunch. All right, cool. My mom would have me, it was bacon and egg in the morning. She would have me the grilled cheese for lunch. And that's like still my favorite because she did those things. I think it stuck with me. But then our bond was so tight. You know, my aunts tell me everything she had. She was a yard person, but she was in and out. So she took care of the inside of the house and the outside. She had her garden. She did her lawn. So I had a lawnmower, I guess a toy lawnmower. I had the little toy things of everything she had apparently because she was gardening. I had my little toy rakes and stuff. So those things that bonded, that kept us close, and then it was taken away because she wasn't able. She had leukemia, and she would be in the hospital, or even if she was home, she didn't have enough strength to go back upstairs to her which it was actually my brother and I's bedroom. But I think my mom, after knowing what I know, knew that her time was limited, so she wanted to spend all of the moments she could with us. So she moved from my dad and her and my dad's room, and she slept upstairs with me and my brother. And after knowing what I know now, that was a big thing for her. She loved her kids. So that void came even when she was in the hospital. And I would be sad, man. When my mom, I would be about 3 houses and we could walk to school then, but without any worries. I was 5, 6 years old, walking 3 blocks away to school. I would come home, and about 3 houses in, I could see my mom was the only one to let the front living room shade up. And if that shade was up, my mom was not in the hospital, and that meant she was home. And I would run to the house, bust in the door, screaming for her because she was home. And if she was home when I left, and the shade was down when I got back, I'm like, damn, mom would have to get rushed to the hospital before she can even let the shade up. And then the shade just stopped coming up. So that was when she passed. And so that was hard to come home every day because my mom was home and that shade was there. Mom wasn't there. That was painful every day. But I didn't know how, to verbalize that. I didn't even know what I was feeling. So I started eating and eating and eating because I was a thin kid. And in third grade, I remember going school shopping and my pants size started increasing. I'm like, what is this? When you had the Levi's and they got the size on them. I'm like, what? So knowing now, I was going through depression and things like that. And some people act out, some people would draw inside, and food was my comfort. Plus, I was starting to become kind of victimized and trauma and all of those things. My dad's girlfriend that moved in was not a nice person. Or later on, when I was like 11, so all of those things started happening to continue, and then my father passed. So it's like, what was going on? I don't know, and just lost and didn't know how to verbalize anything. So again, comfort was food. Some kids will act out and fight and have those issues, but I got missed because I wasn't a behavior problem. Nobody could look at me and say something's wrong. They could look at my clothes and figure something was wrong because my dad didn't get up. I had clothes, but I didn't know how to match them. So I would go to school thinking I'm getting a compliment, and teachers would be like, "Oh, who dressed you today?" I was like, "I did." Like, "Oh, that's nice." Not realizing that I probably had some mess on because I had clothes galore because my mom shopped for everything. And I just don't know how
It wasn't that shouldn't have been your responsibility but if somebody's supposed to be doing that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then somebody was supposed to be checking on me to make sure that I was okay and to make sure that I wasn't depressed or struggling, but they didn't because I didn't have the signs. And I always told myself, because my brother was so smart, as long as I get a C, I'm cool. I was average. My brother's the one that's the smart one. And I don't, whatever I would attribute it to. My mom was here. She was able to spend more time with him. And that's why he got A's. My dad was functionally illiterate and he couldn't do all that. I didn't know why. Every time I came home, say, "Hey, Dad, we got a letter from school." He was like, "Oh, okay. How your brother read it?" I was in 6th grade before I realized my dad couldn't read. He can only read small words. So, and I don't think he went much further in school than that, than 6th grade for myself, but he never really learned how to read. So that was something, growing up in the South, you could, or sometimes you didn't, and he just didn't go to school like his siblings did. A lot of them did. So it wasn't like the opportunity wasn't there. They just said he didn't go a lot. So that was a void, and not feeling the love from my dad's girlfriend. I remember the girlfriend before the one I just mentioned. She moved in with us, and I was like, "Mom, mom, mom," and I'm like looking for a mother. I'm like, "Mom, mom, mom," and it was cool and everything. And then one of my uncles said, "That's not your mother." So I stopped calling her mom because it wasn't my mother. But nobody thought maybe he is doing that because he misses his mom or he needs the connection of a mom. And so you just tell me that's not my mom. I stop calling her mom, but nobody replaces anything with no coping, no talking, no counseling, no nothing. And then they break up because he gets a young lady pregnant and they move in after she moves out, and life became very difficult from there, even worse than it was. So just traumatic experiences after another.
See, Dre, you making it challenging for me because you want to end on a sad note, but I'm not. Watch this professional style that I'm about to do it right now. You talked about how wonderful of a legacy your mother left within you when just the toy mower and all of the different things, and you having that inside of you. How does Dre want to be remembered when he's said and done from this version of life? See how I body that, Dre?
Yes, sir, that works. And my dad gave me some good stuff too, actually, so it was a combination of things. So the hard working, the dedication, the mentorship. My family, both mom and dad, were family people. Our house was like a transition house. When our families would come up from Alabama, any family member, they typically came through our house and then on to somebody else's house or to their own place of independence. So it was a lot of love. It was a lot of support. And it was just that we didn't know anything but family. That was something that was just a part of my mom and dad from the South. They moved up here from the South, met up here, and ended up finding out they grew up 20 minutes from each other in the South, back in the woods. They married 6 months later, had us. So overall, life has been great. As I said, mentoring, motivating, encouraging, being that one that I've been referred to as I can make it happen. Whatever it is, if you need me and that's in the area of what I can do, I'm there. I'm a supporter. And I tend to look out for those individuals that I feel like God has on my path to look out for. So I'm that glue, I'm that stick, I'm that one.
That's it. Make sure y'all share this episode with somebody, man. Share. Jerry dropped a lot of gems from the behavior as a language. That again, that's gonna be the title of this podcast. I'm gonna keep saying it, but discipline versus diagnosis. Like, just share your favorite parts. Clip this up. Share it with somebody. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Just tell them like, yo, you gotta check this episode because X, Y, and Z. Just like let somebody know because I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.